Dr. Clyde Snow has seen what the worst violence in the world has left behind. He's traveled the globe listening to bones, identifying human remains, solving mass murders, and bringing war criminals to justice. On August 9th, Dr. Snow describes his work as a pioneer in forensic anthropology in the debut of A Conversation with Clyde Snow. His career has been devoted to giving identity to the dead and advancing the cause of social justice. A few years ago, it took him to a high-profile trial in Iraq. Saddam Hussein was accused of exterminating about 180,000 Kurds in the late 1980s. When you testified in his trial, he challenged you. He challenged your findings.
Saddam, I think this was almost 2 hours into the trial. By the way, you have to, it's the longer than I've ever been on the stand in my life, because the whole thing lasted about 4 hours, as I recall. But you have to stand. You know, the witness does not sit. A lot of the time was spent with the lawyers yelling at each other and the judges yelling at the judges yelling back, the defendants yelling at everybody. And so I would say a few words and then off it'd go again. And but Saddam did get up and ask me a question, which unfortunately I was not able to answer, but I didn't have the opportunity of answering. But he got up and his preamble was that he had never heard of me, which made sense, but he didn't know who I was and what I was doing there. I could be working with, I believe you mentioned the CIA. I could listen to this because he had very good simultaneous translation. And he also, then he got into, and he made the statement, he said, Iraq is full of mass graves. How do we know that this grave that this person says he dug up was couldn't have been Hittites that lived, 5,000 years ago? And I was just dying, because what I was going to tell him was that, well, I knew that Hittites had a very advanced civilization, but I didn't know it was so advanced that they had digital wristwatches, and I would have found it even more puzzling that all of them were stopped short or maybe a few days after August 28, 1988, I think, when the date that this massacre occurred. And but the judges broke in at that point and said, more or less, asked and answered, because your own lawyers, Mr. Hussein, have already qualified Dr. Snow as an expert. So please sit down. So he sat down, but it was quite an interesting experience.